Sometimes Ohio State just needs to be able to count on 3 points from its special teams, just like you, the listener or the watcher of the beat, needs to count on us for 3 thoughts on a Thursday. Welcome in. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We are presented by the Waterworks. And buckle up, folks, because it is the last position review preview, and it is also probably going to be the bumpiest one because the special teams, as you may know, if you've been counting on us for 3 thoughts on Thursdays over the years, special teams has been something of a pain in my sideburn.
Something of a quagmire, giggity. It's one of those situations where you just, like, you have actually tried a number of times in the last few years to brush off any conversation about special teams. When I'm like, hey, maybe we should talk about special teams play on this episode of our morning show. And you're like, no, we're never talking about special teams. And then special teams has become this absolute Rubicon, this quagmire, this mess, this nightmare scenario that has cost Ohio State multiple times in multiple big games, and it's impossible for us to avoid it any longer. And it's interesting because we're talking 3 thoughts on a Thursday. There were 3 significant areas of change for Ohio State on special teams, and we really don't know what to make of any of them yet. Except, I think we obviously know that Connor Hawkins will be Ohio State's place kicker, the incoming transfer from Baylor, who has as a freshman there for the Bears, did a pretty good job, including 3 or 4 from 50 yards, which is something Ohio State fans are certainly interested in. There's the addition of Dalton Riggs, who will flip-flop with John Furlman as Ohio State's long snapper. Dalton is a 7th-year guy who's played at multiple spots. And then there's the biggest one, which is, of course, the addition of Robbie Disher, the special teams coach from Illinois, who will come to Ohio State and not be a full-time assistant as far as we know. We won't expect to see him like doing recruiting and stuff like that, but his job is to coordinate special teams. And after 2 years departure from the Parker Fleming era, where there was a full-time special teams coordinator, it'll be interesting to see how Disher's responsibilities are different than Parker Fleming's were, but also what the results are going to be and how different they will be for a guy who's made this his entire career, not just something that he was placed into for those 2 years that Parker was.
Yeah, I think we have to start with the fact that, it's a full-time position and responsibility, but it is not designated as one as a recruiter. So Parker Fleming had that on his plate when he was the special teams coordinator. And, there was a time when Ryan Day viewed Parker Fleming as an up-and-coming coach who could work on both sides of the football, who the way that he instructed players was supposed to have carryover to if you were a defensive back or a wide receiver or whatever, that it was all going to be valuable. And they really liked it. And they talked about that being the way of the future. And it did not work out. Parker Fleming's bounced around. He's still in college football, just got hired at Kentucky. But that's going way back and isn't really relevant to this conversation because after the results tapered off and became problematic in some big games at the end of that tenure, tried something else. And they had multiple people spreading around, assistants working with special teams. They had Rob Keyes come in to head up some of that organization. Nate Ebner was helping a year ago. And there were positives. If we wanted to review it, they returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Caden Curry accidentally blocked a punt at one point. I thought that they were fine in punt coverage. The net yardage is one amongst the best in the country. And I know that people would argue that that's because Joe McGuire didn't kick it very far. I would counter that argument against the straw man by saying that was also the way that they were instructing Joe McGuire to do that. We can get into that as we go along. But anyway, that process still did not yield the results that Ryan Day wanted or Ohio State needed, which brings us to Robbie Disher, who has a track record of success in this role in the Big Ten. And he's got to produce that for Ohio State or I will lose my mind.
I just don't know how a special teams coordinator actually impacts things. That's like the question we asked Bradley Robinson a few weeks ago at Roosters when we were there on a Monday. But, what is Robbie Disher? How does Robbie Disher help Connor Hawkins be a better kicker? Like, is that something he can do? Or is everything that his job entails is about organization? It's about identifying potential weaknesses in the other team's special teams alignments and the things like that. Is there any way that a special teams coordinator actually makes an Ohio State punter or kicker better? And that is the question I have as a guy who focuses primarily on roster and personnel and recruiting. Or is it just a simple matter of Rob Keyes and even Gunnar Daniel and other guys who have been there for the last couple of years haven't been given carte blanche to go get the players they want? Are there other qualifying factors like NIL that Ohio State doesn't want to pay a lot of money toward? Is it Ohio State's scholarship count that there's, Jaden Fielding was a preferred walk-on. It's not like he was a guy who was a scholarship player when he got to Ohio State. Joe McGuire came to Ohio State not as a full-time scholarship player. So, are there differences in the way Ohio State handles those players? Is it's been befuddling and baffling and infuriating that Ohio State, a program that has all of the best resources, access to whatever it wants, has failed so consistently at this one part of the game. And it looks like most of the time it's been just personnel has been incorrect. And so how do you fix that? And does Disher have a role in correcting that moving forward? Those are the questions I have for him that I'm hoping to get a sense of his answers soon.
Yeah. I think the part for me, Birm, that is maddening is not really personnel related. And that may sound ridiculous based on the high leverage kicks that were missed by Jaden Fielding. Even before that, like there was once a time where we thought he should have been the one taking the kick at the end of the Georgia semifinal game in the Peach Bowl.
How funny is life, isn't it?
Yeah.
People, they'll look back at that because people are like, oh, let Fielding kick it. He can make it. And then a year later, people are like, get Fielding out of here. Yeah. Run him out of town.
But, I know that there's been a ton of people that have asked about that with, Joe McGuire in the punting situation. If he doesn't have a strong enough leg, and we can debate that all we want. But to me, yes, you're right. Like, I think that they could spend more money on kickers and punters, but that doesn't guarantee you anything in college football. There is the meme and the hashtag about college kickers for a reason. It's a difficult position. It's not as easy as the NFL guys make it look. There's a lot of inconsistency and a different skill set that's required. Yes, money would probably help solve some of that. And it would probably mean that you could make a kick late against Michigan 2 years ago or against Indiana to send it to overtime in the Big Ten championship game. So I understand that the personnel piece is part of this. But when we're talking about Robbie Disher or coaching in this, it's the errors in alignment. I'll never be able to prove it. It's purely a hypothetical. What if they don't line up incorrectly and get an illegal procedure penalty on a really good Joe McGuire punt in the fourth quarter of the Cotton Bowl against Miami? What if they executed a fake 5 years ago and don't completely botch the snap? What if they had the right number of people on the field the next time they tried a fake punt? What if they didn't get burned by fake field goals against, like, going back almost a decade now at this point? It's the execution piece where, yes, we're talking about kicker and punter, and it was a long time before they found the right guy who could end the punt return drought, and Caleb Downs did that, and Lorenzo Styles ended the kickoff return drought. Yeah, the personnel piece is obviously part of it, but there has been something missing just in terms of snap-to-snap execution and simply lining up at times that's been what's really driven me crazy about it, because everyone else who's lining up on the field for all four units of special teams are the most coveted recruits in the country. They have more athleticism than anybody else. And then just getting them to go execute has been a part that's where the disconnect has been.
Yeah, and it's hard to understand it because when you look at the way Ohio State focuses, like ultra fine razor focus on everything else and execution in every other part of the game, it just makes very little sense that they have been so laissez-faire when it came to special teams in that way. Like, it's like, yeah, well, we'll just figure it out. And, I know that people get even frustrated about the just catching a punt and not trying to get returns. Even I've been an advocate the last 2 years. Most of the time, don't even send anybody back. Just go try to block a punt. Like, what's the point? The Ohio State offense has been so good that the goal has to be just catch it and then get the ball back to your offense. And I understand that doesn't always excite people either, but it's just been this absolute like back and forth of really, really bad to mediocre to really, really bad to mediocre. And if you try to find the good things that Ohio State special teams have done in the last 10 years, like, it's a very short list. Things that have really stood out. Obviously, you've got the Styles kick return and the Downs punt return in the last 2 years, and then you go back to the fake punt or the kickoff, the onside kickoff against Maryland, for example, with Chris Olave running down the sideline and catching the ball. But that's when Matt Barnes was brought in from Maryland, a new set of eyes, a fresh opinion, a guy who was viewed as a pretty legitimate special teams guy at that point when Ryan Day hired him in 2019. And since then, because Matt was then thrust into other roles because things went haywire with Jeff Hafley leaving and then Kerry Combs hiring, and it just seemed like it was never the priority for Ryan Day. And I think that this offseason, when you talk about a head coach that is continually evolving and growing into his role, realizing hey, I actually have to let somebody else take care of this because I don't have the bandwidth to do it myself. It is a really smart decision. And again, a testament to what Ohio State is willing to do as a program to say, sure, we have two coordinators that don't need to recruit. We can go out and hire a full-time special teams coordinator who is being paid as a full-time countable assistant at another school in the Big Ten. Ohio State is not cutting any corners when it comes to trying to fix these issues. And it is frustrating that it's taken this long to fix it. But the reality is all of these things are a process and you just have to keep getting better and learning more.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope that the temperature changes for the Ohio State special teams, but whatever it looks like, you can keep your home ready for any season and any weather. With the Waterworks and Hetter Energy Savings Plan, get priority heating service, members-only savings, and continuous comfort all year long. Easy for me to say. Call today to schedule. It's the Waterworks and Hetter, 614-232-2222. I think I definitely agree with what you're saying, Birm, that what Ryan Day has proven over the last 2 months of this offseason is that he wants to get it right. They clearly had to spend more money than they have in the past to land Connor Hawkins. He was amongst the most coveted kickers in the transfer portal. Long snappers aren't necessarily the most expensive thing in the world, but Ohio State felt a need to adjust there, and they got someone with a ton of experience to do that. The tipping point is what Robbie Disher brings to that position. I've understood, for the most part, going back throughout the entirety of Ryan Day's tenure, his approach. When you have the number one defense in the country and you have one of the most efficient offenses in the country, I definitely can appreciate that you don't feel the need to be uber aggressive and have the number one special teams in the country, because it won't ultimately make the difference for you in that many games. But it did come down in the talent equated games to edges in the kicking game, and Ohio State wasn't able to find it. And so that's where it backfired a little bit. It's sort of the same conversation about pressing the gas pedal on offense and changing tempo and maybe not doing it when the moment was right. There's no rule against Ohio State being you know what, we have the better athletes. What if we blocked a punt in every game, or at least tried to? And so it is part of the evolving process that you mentioned. And if Ryan Day is adjusting his mindset on that on special teams, which I think clearly he is, good. That's fine. Because just being average at special teams and being elite at the other two things wins you 90% of your games. But there were times, Georgia, Michigan, and Indiana, and even I'm going to include Miami in the fourth quarter because of that punt, where...
Well, not just that. Their kicker made a 49-yard field goal that changed the entire tenor of the game.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that deserves to fall in the same bucket for me. And we say, well, you're talking about 5 or 6 plays a game. Yeah, well, Jim Tressel once said that the punt is the most important play in the game. So why waste them? Maximize.
It's not even that, though. It's not even 5 or 6 plays a game. It's 5 or 6 plays a season for Ohio State when it comes to special teams. And so just the notion that it's just going to be okay if you're okay is just not good enough. And we saw that multiple times. And so I think, again, having a man like Disher come in who this is all he's done in college football, that's been his focus for years. He's been a lead at it. He got to Illinois and they blocked 7 punts in year one. When you're saying to yourself, it's okay if we have less offensive possessions. It's okay because our defense is so good. Our offense is so efficient. It's going to be fine. It still wouldn't be a bad idea to make some of those offensive possessions 40 yards long instead of 80 yards long. So why not take a shot? Because there's no difference if you don't field the punt compared to the last few years. But if you block it, it makes a huge difference. So, that's really what it comes down to. Sometimes you just have to take a chance and make a change. And I did that when I decided to give Awaken 180 an opportunity to change my life, change my health, change the way I eat, change the way I think about eating. Everyone sees it. And I know we've seen the comments. People say, we won't really believe it until we see Birm on a Woody Wednesday for Snappy J's. Well, we're like 4 days away from that, folks. You're going to see it. So
close.
You're going to see it. I'm just going to wear a bath towel to show everyone.
No,
I will not wear a bath towel. I will wear regular clothes, but you'll be able to tell anyway. Awaken180weightloss.com. Go there, look at the plan, and understand that they give you the tools you need, a roadmap to find success. I feel so much better. I look so much better. Everyone around me is like, oh my gosh, what happened to you? You're beautiful now. And I take that and I say, thank you.
Wait, they're not saying that you look thinner or that you lost weight. They're just going straight to beautiful.
Yeah, it's been actually like the greatest gift that anyone's ever given me. So thank you, Awaken180weightloss.com. Go there, check it out. Again, folks, if you started now, you would lose 20 pounds by the end of March without a doubt. So it's worth looking into. Awaken180weightloss.com. Go there. I did it. Austin did it. It's been great for both of us. The end.
Yeah. And look, I know I complain about the special teams a lot more than I praise it. And, I'm not saying that I'm wrong for doing that, but I also have to recognize that I don't know what the solution is. I'm trying to make the point as well that Ryan Day has tried multiple different iterations of how he wants to attack it, not just schematically, not just in terms of level of aggression, but also who's coaching what and what players need to be involved in it in all, 4 areas of that. I don't think it's been for lack of effort. And I also know that it's complicated. It's not every part of coaching college football is hard. And if he put all of this effort into building the best offense in the country and then hiring Matt Patricia or Jim Knowles before that and turning the Silver Bullets into the number 1 unit in the country, it's like, it's hard to be good at every single part of the game. I fully recognize that. I know that the standard is the standard in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And that trying to figure out exactly why they haven't been able to get across the finish line with special teams is going to drive Ryan Day just as crazy, probably more crazy than it makes me. So it's not as if he's just sat around for the last 7 years and it's like, well, hope it doesn't come down to it. Cross my fingers and knock on wood. Like, they've tried a lot of different things and it hasn't worked, which I think that's the part that makes it more frustrating to look at than anything else, because it hasn't just been one guy over 7 years in charge. There've been 7 different people that they've tried in different incarnations of the special teams, and it hasn't connected. And maybe it's just a curse. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's just a position that requires some luck. I mean, if you look at this again, look at this list here. If you're watching this on 97.1 The Fan YouTube channel or 10 TV or 10 TV Plus, like, you see we've at the list here, it says Robbie Disher, Connor Hawkins, who is a transfer from Baylor. He's from Texas. Brady Young, who's from Ohio, went to Cincinnati, went to Houston Christian, transfers into Ohio State. He will be the backup punter because Joe McGuire has not gone anywhere. Joe McGuire, Ohio State had to go to Australia and recruit Joe McGuire from a club like rugby football, Australian rules football team. Dalton Riggs is a 7th-year player who went to BYU when he departed high school from Idaho and then transferred to the University of Central Florida. And then you had John Furlman, who you're replacing, who is a transfer from Arizona State, who is a preferred. Like, this isn't like you have to know what you're looking for. And that's why I go back down to some of it is just from a purely personnel standpoint, who's making those decisions and who's deciding that a player has the right makeup. Because the reality is, if you look at a guy like Jaden Fielding, who's no longer at Ohio State, has moved on. Nick McClarty, who Ohio State went to Australia to get, has moved on. So there's departures here for sure. But who's decided that Jaden Fielding, who I don't know that he was a full-time kicker, like starting kicker at IMG when he was there, even he was a preferred walk-on, has a big leg. Who's having those conversations that say, do you have the right makeup to be the kicker at Ohio State? Like, who is in charge of that? And I don't know, because you haven't really had a full-time kicking coach. You have had other coaches doing things around. And again, Gunnar Daniels done a nice job for Ohio State, and I know he's involved in those conversations. But how much time and effort is really put into getting to know those players, or are they completely interchangeable, as we see when you look at a list that includes all these guys from all these different backgrounds that come from multiple stops? It's just such a weird position. And that's why I think, to your point, like, it has to just be done right no matter who's there. So most of it is a mental thing. Most of it's a focus thing. Most of it's Ohio State saying this has to be a priority and not just an afterthought. And I think there have been times in the last few years when it's an afterthought all the way up until the moment it costs you a football game. And then it becomes a pressing issue. And I think what Ryan Day might be learning in now heading into year 8 as a head coach is that every issue is a pressing issue all the time. And you can't just say, well, we don't really need to worry about special teams 90% of the time because it doesn't matter. Like, the only games that it matters in are the ones that cost you a national championship. So it seems like it should be a matter 100% of the time.
That seems pretty important. And that's been proven, multiple times. Rattled off 3 games right off the top of my head for 3 Thoughts Thursday that special teams have been an issue. So pretty interested to see, and we won't in spring, dramatic changes. Like, that's not really the way that spring camp works. And we're going to have limited viewing opportunities to watch the Buckeyes. So, like,
are you interested at all? And I know that we're wrapping up because this is special teams, but how Ohio State attacks the return game, will it be any different under Disher in your mind? And understanding that there are players now on the roster who have a role, like Anthony Rogers, for example, that you've been like kind of waiting to see if he can bust into that, or Legend Bay, or even Kyle Parker or Devin McEwen. I wonder if that's a piece of what Ohio State decided to do in the offseason when it came to the receivers and the ball carriers that they brought into the program. Because obviously Brandon Inniss has been reliable as far as catching the football, but he has not really proven to be explosive in the return game. And there had been some inconsistencies when it came to like decision making. Like, he catches the ball when he catches it, but when he tries to catch it, but there's obviously been question marks about the decision making, about letting balls bounce or go over his head or whatever. Like, I just like, it's going to be one of the storylines we don't really talk about in a roster that has 50 new players. And we're not going to talk much about special teams moving forward between now and the, September 12th game in Austin, Texas, I assume. So, like, I hope that we are able
that's
to
game, Birm, that's a game right away where your special, game was 14-7 last time they played. It was 28-14 in the Cotton Bowl the year before that. It's going to be a competitive game. Right. It's going to be a talent equated game. The kicking game is going to matter.
All right, so we're not going to talk about it between now until that day, probably. So I hope that we get an opportunity with Robbie Disher at some point in the near future to really pick his brain about what is your philosophy on these things. But more so than that, and this is more of a Ryan Day question because he's the guy who ultimately has to decide who he trusts and who he gives the reins to. Like, how confident is Ryan Day in what he's seen already that, like, he knows he can let Robbie Disher handle this and get his hands out of it? Because the return game, like, again, when you mentioned it earlier, when you have athletes like Ohio State has, when you have the depth of talent that Ohio State has, you have an advantage in special teams if you choose to use it. And I just don't understand why they've chosen so regularly to let that part of the game just sit and be, average.
Yeah. I mean, obviously picking someone.
It's not called average teams, Austin. It's called special teams.
It is supposed to be special, and it needs to be extraordinary. But the first thing that jumped out when I was thinking about Robbie Disher and looking at the Illinois special teams a couple of years ago, they blocked 7 kicks. So I know for a fact, and I'm looking forward to getting to know him and talking to him over the next few days heading into spring camp about his philosophy, his aggression, because he was doing that and getting those results with a team that's far less athletically gifted than he's going to have at Ohio State. Like, the best Illinois team will never, ever match up 1 through 85 with Ohio State. So if he was looking for those edges and exploiting whatever advantage he could find with Illinois, I have to imagine that's got to be exciting for him at Ohio State with what is at his disposal. And I would hope what you said is right, that Ryan Day trusts him to back off and let him do his thing, because if he does, then Robbie Disher is going to be like, this is great. Here's the schemes that I use here, and now I get this personnel. Let me do my thing, and I'm going to block. It doesn't have to be 7. I think 5 would be great. Maybe 3 would be fine. But like, that's, if you say
try, just try. That's all.
Thing. Yeah, just if you say, Robbie Disher, you were brought here to do this and do your job, which I have to assume that was Ryan Day's approach. This guy has proven that he can get results with a lot less talented teams.
Yep, and spring practice starts Tuesday. I'm so excited.
I'm very excited. And also, I'm pumped up for a Freaky Friday mailbag, the last pre-spring version. So get those questions in right now to the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. That's the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. We will get to at least 4, but maybe more questions when we dig into that mailbag to close out this week, the last Friday, first Friday last Friday without spring football in March. Made a lot.
It's still the first Friday in March, though.
It is, crushed it, absolutely killed it to end this version of the beat and end the position preview reviews brought to you by the Waterworks and Hetter. Thanks so much for joining us. Get those questions in. We'll talk to you tomorrow. He's Birm. I'm Austin.